Margaret Sanger comes back to the United States of America in 1916. That's when she launched her public relations campaign. Her organization, which she founded, which became Planned Parenthood, called the Birth Control League. It was launched in 1921. Of course, as you know, later on it became Planned Parenthood as we see it. There were two principles for her that drove this organization that were inseparable. This is what she said right here. Her statement, we have it. It's on record. She said this, quote, "Eugenics without birth control seems to us as a house built upon the sands. It is at the mercy of the rising streams of the unfit." By the way, this was very popular early in the United States. If you think about it, there were, I want to say something like 33 states in the Union that had passed laws that required sterilization of certain people classes, right? If you had Down syndrome, you were sterilized. If you were considered to be a burden to society, it was because eugenics drove them. That's exactly what it was. That's what all of this is. Her great aspiration, this is a quote from her, was this: to create a race of thoroughbreds by encouraging more children from the fit and less from the unfit. This was documented in a paper that she wrote called The Pivot of Civilization. 1922 is when she wrote that. She does a 1921 speech to a group of eugenicists where she makes this statement: "The most urgent problem today is how to limit and discourage the over-fertility of the mentally and physically defective." No joke. That's what drove her. That's exactly the place that it was. She goes to a conference, by the way. And in the conference, she goes to speak to them. This is her birth control conference that she started. This was in New York City in 1925. And she goes to address a group of the type of people that today would be associated with the World Economic Forum and that crowd. And this is what she says to them. She says, "The government of the United States deliberately encourages and even makes necessary by its laws the breeding with a breakneck rapidity of idiots, defectives, diseased, feeble-minded, and criminal classes. Billions of dollars are expensed by our state and federal governments and by private charities and philanthropies for the care, the maintenance, the perpetuation of these classes. Year by year, more money is expensed to maintain an increasing race of morons which threaten the very foundations of our civilization. The dullard, the gawk, the numbskull, the simpleton, the weakling, the scatterbrained are amongst us in overshadowing numbers, intermarrying, breeding, inordinately prolific, literally threatening to overwhelm the world with their useless and terrifying get." Yes, she said that. Here's something else in case you want more clarity about her view concerning this. She also made this statement. This is the real Malthusian line gets toted. Ready? You can hear Thomas Malthus in her right now when she says this. And by the way, can I also make this statement? The enemy's desire has always been to attack the godly. When the godly are attacked, then it's easier for evil to take place. I will say this before, and I've said it again. I have no problem saying this. The problem that is going on with abortion in this country and the problem with leftists being allowed to do what they're doing has nothing to do with the ungodly. You should expect the ungodly to be ungodly. But all of the evils that we are seeing manifest at the levels that we're seeing manifest right now is the problem of the believer. Because we have not spoken up against it. We have not put an end to it. And because we have not spoken up, because we have not gotten involved, we've allowed this evil to run rampant. We are the ones that God has filled with the Spirit. We are the ones that God has given insight to identify these evils and to speak out concerning them. But if nobody understands the depth of spiritual warfare that exists as a result of all of this stuff, nothing's going to be done about it. Here's her toting the Malthus line. This is terrible. This is her statement. "Organized charity is the symptom of a malignant social disease. Those vast, complex, interrelated organizations aiming to control and to diminish the spread of misery and destitution are the surest sign that our civilization has bred, is breeding, and is perpetuating constantly increasing numbers of defectives, delinquents, and dependents. My criticism, therefore, is not directed at the failure of philanthropy, but rather at its success. These dangers inherent in the very idea of humanitarianism and altruism, dangers which have today produced their full harvest of human waste." Enough? Well, when you become Malthusian in nature, you also breed some of the worst forms of racism that exists in this country. For those of you that might not recognize it, Margaret Sanger perhaps may be the epitome of one of the most racist people that ever lived. And by the way, many of the board members that drove the existence of her organization did the racist things that they did in the name, ready for this, of destroying white supremacy. Yep. In the name of destroying white supremacy, they said the things that I'm about to read to you. Here's one. Margaret Sanger. This is her speaking. She started a project called the Negro Project. Goes without saying, her whole goal behind starting Planned Parenthood was the elimination of the black race. That's exactly what she wanted to do, amongst many others. This is her quote: "The gradual suppression, elimination, and eventual extinction of defective stocks," that's what she called people that were black, "those human weeds which threaten the blossoming of the first flowers of American civilization." Right? That was the goal. That was their mission statement. That was what they wanted to do. Her project, the strategy of this particular project, the Negro Project, was to colored ministers to travel to various black enclaves and propagandize for birth control. She writes a letter to a person by the name of Clarence Gamble, and I do not have the time to talk about who he was. It's just a whole other story. But look what she writes. She says, "We propose to hire 3 or 4 colored ministers, preferably with social service backgrounds and with engaging personalities. The most successful educational approach to the Negro is through a religious appeal. We do not want word to get out that we want to exterminate the Negro population, and the minister is the man who can straighten out that idea if it ever occurs to any of their more rebellious members." In her autobiography, she writes about the KKK. She had an experience at a KKK rally. Let me tell you what she writes. "Always to me, any roused group was a good group, and therefore I accepted an invitation to talk to the women's branch of the Ku Klux Klan. My address that night had to be in the most elementary terms, as though I were trying to make children understand. In the end, through simple illustrations, I believe I had accomplished my purpose. A dozen invitations to speak to similar groups were proffered." There was a Negro project director that she'd hired that actually wrote this: "There is a great danger that we will fail because the Negroes think it is a plan for their extermination. Hence, let's appear to let the colored run it." Another project director said this: "I wonder if Southern darkies can ever be entrusted with a clinic. Our experiences cause us to doubt their ability to work under white supervision." Margaret Sanger's dream was fulfilled, discouraging the defective and diseased elements of humanity from their reckless and irresponsible swarming and spawning. That's exactly what it was. Folks, I haven't even began to touch how evil and how dark Margaret Sanger actually was. She was absolutely evil.